Good morning, everybody. So I'm on my own today. Poor Michael has no idea what it is, but it's something in his head, and he's knocked out from antihistamines. And we lost our interview. We had a special interview set up for yesterday, and we lost our special interview because of the same thing. So apparently, there's some thing going around that's just taking people out. So you're stuck with me by myself today. So here's what I'm going to suggest. So I've got the comments up. So those of you who are watching live, if you've got any questions or comments, I've got them up so I can see them, pop them in there, because the one thing I want to make sure that I'm not doing on this video this morning is not hyperbole, not a lot of opinion. I will give you some opinion, but I'll tell you when I'm giving you the opinion. But I just wanted to show you guys some facts, see what you think about them, and let's discuss them, or, call me later or text. I mean, whatever, but let's make this kind of a group decision, because I don't want to portray it as I'm completely right on this. I just did my research, and we need to talk about that. So I do want to point something out. So this is what I did to the bill, or I'm sorry, the rules. This was the rules. So you can tell I was trying to, and so here's what I did. Here's my methodology. So I took the rules and I read the rules, and then I matched them with the bill. So the bill is HB 1934. That's what the rules were created to match, was this. And just to make sure, I called Sherry Connolly yesterday and asked her, I said, are the rules, because I was reading them and everything kind of seemed off and I didn't know, what I was doing here. And I said, are the rules supposed to mirror the bill exactly? And she said, no, but they are supposed to have the legislator's intent. They are to encapsulate the legislator's intent. So I reread the bill, and I'm just going to give you the upshot now because I've got a slide presentation to go through here that I worked on all night. So hang in there with me, please, so I don't feel like it was for nothing. Because I'm a little old to do the whole thing at night. I realized by about 10 o'clock, my brain cells felt like mush. So yikes. Those of you who are young, really enjoy your brain cells now. So after I really started sitting down and looking at it, yes, there are some changes and we'll go through those, but I didn't really feel like there was a manipulation of legislator intent in this bill. So that being said, let's go through the slide presentation and, we'll just kind of see how things go. And again, if you have questions or comments, I welcome them. I do a lot of research. I was going to say do, but you know how that goes. I do a lot of research. So I would hope that my research would be, on par with my other research. But nobody's ever perfect. So, let's just do that. All right. So Oklahoma Parental Choice Tax Credit Act and associated rules. I just listed this as observations and comparisons because I just want people to see what I saw and see what they think. Okay, so here, first of all, let's talk about some basics of the bill. So it's HB 1934. You can see the authors there. It does provide a tax credit from the state to parents and schools for students to attend Oklahoma private schools. All right, now, the credit only applies to Oklahoma parents who put their child or their children in private schools, which are either accredited by the U.S. Sorry, not the U.S. We're not going there. By the State Board of Education or another accrediting association. And there is an association in the state that does accredit private schools. The one that I know of is an association, but I don't know of any others. I mean, if somebody else does, let me know. Okay, so here's what I did. I broke this all down so we could just kind of put it in some in a way that made sense. So here are the tax credit per household for the adjusted gross income. So if you make less than $75,000, you get $7,500 per child. If you make between $75,000 and $150,000, you get $7,000 per child. If you make between $150,000 and $225,000, you get $6,500 a child. If you make $225,000 to $250,000, you are given $6,000 a child. If it's greater than $250,000, there's a $5,000 per child tax credit applied. So there is a stipulation in the bill for homeschooling families, and homeschooling families get $1,000 per child. There are funding caps on this. So for private school in 2024, because the bill's not going to obviously work until next year. So for 2024, it's 150 million. For 2025, it's 200 million. For 2026, it's 250 million. And then for homeschooling, it's kind of capped at 225 for 2025 and above. For the years 2025 and above, it's capped at $5 million. And that's not for a family, that's for the whole total amount. All right, now, I did want to put this little section of the bill in here because I thought it was interesting and we should know about it. In the event of a failure of revenue pursuant to the Oklahoma State Finance Act, the tax credits otherwise authorized in this subsection will be reduced proportionately to the amount of money that's appropriated. So essentially, if the legislature isn't able to fund it, it goes away or it's reduced proportionally. So let's say, and I'm just making this up. So let's say you had a $7,500 tax credit per child. Maybe it goes down to $5,500 tax credit per child. Maybe it goes down to 25. I don't know. It would just depend on what the revenue is for that, for what the revenue loss is. All right, now let's talk about qualified expenses. What are those? Tuition and fees for non-public online learning programs, academic tutoring services provided by an individual or a private academic tutoring facility, textbooks, curriculum, or other instructional materials, including but not limited to supplemental materials or associated online instruction required by an education service provider. And there's one more, which is fees for nationally standardized assessments, including but not limited to assessments used to determine college admission and advanced placement examinations, as well as tuition and fees for tutoring or preparatory courses for assessment. And that's the weird thing. In the bill, it literally has a, it says and then it stops. There's nothing after the and, though there's an and. And this was the final version of the bill. So somebody did a little something goofy there. I'm not sure what that is. So let me just ask this question, because this was a question that kind of got brought up as I was reading. So why is there a list of qualified expenses the credit will cover when the bill says the credit may only be used at an accredited private school? How many online private schools are accredited? Right? Because it said online. So how many are accredited? I don't know. I'm just asking. How many private schools make parents buy their own books and materials? Because I thought that was kind of an interesting question. If we're just talking about private schools and that's the only thing the tax credit goes to, and the private schools have to be accredited, that's a question. All right, so let's keep going. The credit does go against Oklahoma income tax. There were places in the bill where other Oklahoma statutes are referenced. And I do want to make this point. When you look at a bill, you really need to go look up the statute that's referenced. And it really anymore with the intrawebs, it's very easy to do. Often I just will type in what I'll say Oklahoma first, Oklahoma statutes, and then I'll type in what that statute is. And invariably it takes me to Justia law or to the Oklahoma, sometimes even the Oklahoma Constitution, whatever, but that's how I find out. So I went back and I looked, and it is against, the way I read it, it does go against Oklahoma. The credit goes against Oklahoma income tax. All right, the commission. Now, here's an interesting thing. And this was written in the rules. And it's what got me kind of irritated at first, because in the rules, literally, it says priority consideration. And I thought, priority consideration. Okay, what is that about? And so I thought, well, this doesn't sound good. So I went back and I looked through the bill, the actual bill, and it is not labeled that in the bill, but it is the same thing. So basically, what we're saying is this: the tax commission shall give first preference to families with an adjusted gross income of less than, remember that there are categories, right? So the bottom two categories, and you'll hear me say that quite a bit on this presentation. I hate it when I say sorry. I'm going to try to be careful about that. And then I almost did it again. So on this presentation, I'm going to make sure we'll just realize that when I talk about the bottom two tiers, I'm talking about less people who make an adjusted gross income in Oklahoma of less than $75,000, and those with an AGI from $75,000 to $150,000. So if people apply, and you do have to apply, there is an application process that's outlined in the rules for the OTC. So when you apply, and you have to apply at a different window for your different tax brackets. So the first tax bracket that has the first application window is less than $75,000, and then it goes from there. So I will say this, ECHO, ECKO, Every Kid Counts. They have, if you go to their website, and I think it's ecko.org, if you go to their website, they have a really good, and I'm not going to find it because I'm standing here right now, but they had a really good primer on how you apply for them, and they had some good questions. And after I read the bill and the rules, I went back and looked, and they did a pretty good job of sussing all of that out. So if you want even more information on that, you can go there. But the point of the matter is this, that in the lower tax brackets, you do get first preference. So and there is a cap on the amount of money that the state is willing to give back or give out, however you say that, in the year. So once they hit the cap, if your application hasn't been processed, then you don't get the tax credit for that year. And they are processed, at least according to the law, they are going to be processed in that order. All right. So for homeschooling families to receive the credit, and it says this, shall submit to the commission receipts for qualified expenses. So I'm not saying that there isn't a provision in the rules for people applying for private school to have to submit those records, because there is. But I'm just saying, and I'll bring this up again later on in the program, homeschoolers have in the state of Oklahoma never been asked to submit anything. So this is an enormous leap that homeschoolers would get a whole $1,000 per child to homeschool for expenses, but then you would have to turn around and give those receipts to the state government in order to collect that income tax offset. And I will say they did set it up differently. So with homeschoolers, you can take it off on your taxes. With anybody else applying for private school, you have to fill out the application with the OTC and go through the application process before you can get any type of a tax credit. All right. So here are a couple of things about the bill that just stood out to me that I thought was worth talking about. The tax credit bill prevents liability for anybody involved. So that just stimulated a question to me. What is liability, number one, in that section? And I guess I was so concentrating on these other parts that I just simply didn't think about what that might be. So anybody who thinks what a liability might be, let me know. But it kind of perturbed me that you would put that in a bill. So I'm going to write a bill, but guess what? Nobody is at fault for anything bad that happens. Well, I look back on Common Core and I think there's nothing good that happened from that. And it's all you have to do is do an internet search on Common Core and problems or Common Core results or something like that. And it's just a litany of blah, yick. So, obviously to me anyway, that was educational malpractice. So if that's educational malpractice, or is this kind of what we're talking about? Something like educational malpractice, but then you can't sue anybody because they go, oh, not me, I didn't do it. So think about that. Taxpayers are allowed to defend the act in court if it's constitutionally challenged. Okay, first thing, I didn't think the state got to tell me who I could sue in court or what court actions I could make. So I thought that was really kind of interesting. Why are you giving me permission to help you if this goes to court to find it unconstitutional? So, and why might it be unconstitutional? Well, this is state money, and there are gymnastics here to make this work. And we'll talk about those in a second, but this is state money. It's not your money. I'm sorry, but once you give it to the government, the government has it. You don't have it anymore. So this is government money, right? So if you give government money to a Christian school, might that be a problem? Might that upset some people? who knows? But you are given permission. If you are going to take advantage of this, you're given permission to go help the state fight that in court. That bothers me. I mean, it just flat bothers me. Sorry. Then there's this one, which is a fairly standard thing in other bills, but I'm kind of surprised to see it here. None of the provisions are severable. So if one part is found unconstitutional, then the whole act is invalid. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so here's some questions. So why is there a liability clause? We just talked about that. Why is there a paragraph in the bill allowing parents to get involved in lawsuits? So think about those things. Think on those. All right, so this is the section in the actual bill, HB 19, I don't know why I have a mental block against that, HB 1934, that specifically points to the Oklahoma Tax Commission as the arbiter of the rule. So it says page 6, section 2E, the commission shall prescribe applications for the purpose of claiming the credits authorized by the Oklahoma Parental Choice Tax Credit Act and a deadline by which application shall be submitted. I will say that they did do that. They did have a prescription for an application for the purpose of claiming the tax credit. And they did have deadlines. And because remember, I told you that at the beginning, if you're in the lower tax bracket, then you have the earlier deadline. So they did set those up. So there you go. Page 8, section 3 of the bill. Both of those were from the bill. A, D, the commission may promulgate rules to implement the provisions of the Oklahoma Parental Choice Tax Credit Act. Well, they essentially did that. I can't find a place where they didn't. Okay, so let's talk about what do the Oklahoma Tax Commission rules say? Pretty much what they should, as far as I can tell. Again, I looked over them, and if anybody has something different to tell me, please, I'm so willing to listen. This isn't just me saying blah, 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 blah. So let me know. All right. So let's just hit this. Rules do not mirror the bill 100%. There were specifications made and added to the tax commission rules and language, but you pretty much have to because the bill was a bill. The tax commission has specific things like they had to, I'll give you an example, and I didn't put this in my program, so I'll just give you an example quickly. They had to define what an Oklahoma taxpayer is because it didn't really define that in the bill. In the bill, it just basically said a taxpayer was a person who had a kid in a private school. Well, I don't know that I necessarily, I mean, I would like it to be a little more specific. You're giving away my tax dollars here. So they did make it more specific, a person owing or liable to pay an Oklahoma tax and, went down there. So they did do that. And there were a couple other ones. I don't like the way they rewrote that priority consideration part. I think that's kind of what tweaked me at the beginning. And I was like, these rules are not the same thing as the bill because it just didn't, I mean, it's written in some places, and this is just coming from a writer. This is just constructive criticism. I would have edited it a little differently. So it was kind of a little difficult to read. And there's that. So the bill did, to me, appear to mirror the legislative intent when I looked at the actual bill. And I just mentioned that about several, definitions are different. But again, after I talked to Sherry and she said, well, it just can't, influence or it can't change legislative intent. Then I thought, okay, that's the way I'm going to read the rules, and look at them with the law. So that's how I did it. And I just couldn't find it. And I'm not saying I'm not being obtuse. I just couldn't. All right. Other than some difficult wording, which I just talked about, there wasn't anything I could find that looked like it needed to be fixed or changed to make the rules mirror the law. That's the thing. But I did have this question, but it was in both things. It wasn't just in the, hold on a second. I'm going to change I don't even know why I'm using this. It's not like Michael's here to talk to me, but this will not stay in my ear. These were a couple of questions. these were some questions I had. But the problem was they were mirrored in both the bill and the rules. So I don't know that you can write in, to the tax commission before the 12th and say, I don't like these rules, because it was the same thing that was in the bill. And basically both HB 1934 and the OTC rules repeat the definition of education service provider to include public school district, public charter school, and magnet school. And so my question was, if this is a private school bill, why are we talking about public school anything? Why is that even in the language in either thing? Because you get confused when you see so many versions. And granted, I wasn't Johnny on the spot. I mean, my mom died in February, so I was kind of out for the legislative session for this year. But I've spent, the session before this last session, I mean, numerous of us were looking at these tax credit bills and just going through them line for line. And there were a lot of things in those old tax credit bills that got moved to HB 1934. And so this was some of them, because I remembered those. I remembered those from previous versions, that part being left in there, but I couldn't figure out exactly what that had to do with anything in this particular bill, because in the other bills, they were talking about moving kids out of public schools and into private schools. And this bill specifically, and the rules, say that you have to be in a private school before you can get any money. So what does that have to do with that? I'm really kind of lost there. All right, this bill does not describe the mechanism by which schools or families are paid. So they basically just the bill puts that off on the OTC to figure out. But the rules say this: the OTC creates a warrant that's made payable to the taxpayer, which is also mailed to the private school, which I didn't understand at all. How can a warrant be in two places? So that was a little weird, and maybe something we should write the tax commission about, because why is it going? And maybe I'm just too dumb to know. Could be. So basically, the taxpayer endorses the warrant to the public school restrictively. I mean, they have to. So the taxpayer gets the warrant, then they have to endorse it to the private school and give it to the private school, unless it's a reimbursement so let's say they've already paid the private school tuition, then they can get reimbursed from the tax commission in two separate, you have to get two installments. They don't just give you a lump sum. They give you half of it, and then they give you another half at another time. And that just is credited back to you, the taxpayer. But this way, if you don't have the money, like if you make less than $75,000, I would struggle to see how you're able to actually pay for your private school tuition and then get reimbursed, right? So in that particular case, that the state steps in and uses this warrant, and the warrant is payment for the bill, but the family has to endorse the warrant over to the public school. So to me, this is a very huge and convoluted way to keep the state from paying the school directly, because that's, I think, where the unconstitutionality is going to come in. The state can't use public funds and send them to a private school. So this was just all kind of a jumping through creating some hoops to like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something. I don't know, to keep the state from actually giving the money directly to the private school. And this is me opinion. That's simply nonsense. I mean, you're just creating this. And then what if the taxpayer doesn't sign? I don't know. It just seems like that's that I wasn't I don't like that. Let's just say that. It's in the OTC rules, but I don't know that. I mean, I guess I could write them and say, well, this is a stupid way to try to keep the state from using state money to, to go to a private school. Let's figure out some other way. You should just pay the private school directly and then, suck it up for whatever happens. Otherwise, that concerns me. So there you go. There's another concern. All right. So now we've talked about the rules. Okay. And if you're on here just to find out what I thought about the rules, then you may get off and go about your day. But I'm going to give you a lot of data here because I've spent a lot of time, putting this together. And I just wanted to talk about the whole problems with the tax credit bill in the first place. So there are just a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. So let's talk about this. So, I mean, to me, the problems with this particular tax credit thing, they're just all over the place and very undefined. So this was billed as a tax credit, and everybody talked about it like it was a tax credit. I argued with legislators who argued with me, no, it's a tax credit. No, it's a tax credit. Just had a conversation the other day with Nathan Dahm that assured me that with all the property taxes and all of the grocery taxes and with all of the income taxes, there's no way that it's not a tax credit, that people are going to get their money back. Well, no, it's a voucher for everybody in the lowest two tiers for sure. I mean, without question. Here's how I know. So hold on. Oh my goodness. Well, I think I've lost my, hold on. I'm going to have to bring it in now. I had a video file that I wanted to show you and my video file decided to go away. So hang on one second and I'll bring it in another way. I hope I will bring it in another way. Somebody can play some music in the background while I'm trying to, there it is. Okay. Now I'll bring it in.
We do have lots of options as parents, but if we don't have the economic wherewithal to take advantage of it, then we might as well not have the options at all. And that's the problem. It's that most parents, by and large, 95% of them don't have the economic wherewithal. So the tax credit, you're correct in part. It's a tax credit for those in the upper economic strata. So essentially 150,000 and higher, it is a tax credit in the sense that they're going to get a benefit to the degree that they pay taxes. But for those that are in lower incomes, of course, it's not a tax credit. It is essentially a voucher, and we need to just call it that because that's what it is. It's run very similarly to the EITC. But we have to remember that the state's already spending roughly $13,000 of taxpayer money on each individual student anyway. So they're getting a fraction of that to essentially say, look, we recognize that you need more options, but you can't presently afford them. So we have all these options out there, but you're still stuck in the public school. Your kids are trapped in the public school because you lack the funds. We're going to give you the funds to take advantage of those options until such time as it's been made clear the public options are no longer viable.
Okay. So after that was Brett Farley. He is the CEO essentially of the Catholic Archdiocese group. It's a group, and he actually was a founder of ECHO. So here were my thoughts about that. So because most people can't afford a private school education for their kids, the state taxpayers have to give them the funds to put their kids in a private school until so many kids are out of public schools that they can't keep their doors open anymore and are no longer a viable option. That was Brett's whole argument, essentially. And that's been the school choice argument forever, is that it's we can use the state as a private business essentially to put economic pressure on the schools. And then once we have taken all of these kids out to give them other options, right, other choices, then the schools don't have any, we don't fund them. I mean, we're not giving them appropriations. This is the idea. So they'll just wither up and blow away. And so that's how this is going to work. And I'm like, how really the government is going to stop handing money? So we get them all on, I mean, there are just so many problems with that argument. I can't even articulate them without just my brain going, so you have to give the kids the funds, or the families the funds, to get them out of public school so we don't appropriate. I mean, we'll talk all about this, as we go through it, but you really need to consider these arguments here. I mean, when has the government stopped handing out taxpayer dollars? I mean, how many entitlements do we have now that everybody said, oh, no, we're just giving them a hand up. It's not a handout. And yet we're stuck with those, and taxpayers are paying for those. I mean, it doesn't stop. And for him to think, and for these school choice people to think, oh, no, ideologically, this is sound. We're going to give taxpayer money to these kids, let them go to private schools, and then we'll stop. I mean, once the public schools are dried up and blown away, we'll stop. You're not going to stop giving them money. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And there is nothing historically to back that up. If somebody can find even one instance in government time where the government benevolently gave some of our tax dollars to other people and then said, oh, no, we're not going to do that anymore because we've solved that problem, we're going to take that back. If you can find that, I'm not sure what I would do, because I would be so fascinated by that. So, I mean, there you go. And, that's just something to think about. So let's go back to where we were. Brett is the executive director of I can't read it with the slide thing in the way. It would be nice, StreamYard, if we didn't do that. But it says that he's executive director of. Okay, so now I'm not going to tell you where I found all of these figures, but I will tell you that most of them were census data. Okay, and you can just find those online. It's not hard to track them down. I'm not the only person that has the ability to track these down, but I just didn't put all of the little links, where I found these. Okay. So according to our last census, the Oklahoma population is a little over 4 million people. Okay. Inside that 4 million people, you break it down to 1.5 million, basically households, and they consider a household essentially a mom and dad and kids, whether it's an extended family situation, whatever, it's just a household. Okay, now there are two kinds of households: a family household, and there are about 1 million of those, and then non-family households, which really aren't as many. Well, in family households, the kids under 18 are about 480,000. The reason why I picked that is because the state of Oklahoma mandates public education or some form of education for all children under 18. So there you go. It's 480,239. Okay. But the non-family households don't have any kids in school, right? Okay. So let's look at this. Numbers of kids in public schools according to the state. So you can go Google how many kids are in public schools, Oklahoma State Department of Education, and they have this little thing that'll pop up, and it's a little fast facts that you can get. So I pulled it off the fast facts, and it says 698, almost 700,000 kids in public schools. So this is an interesting number here, 480. That's kind of interesting. But now I want to point this out. Our Oklahoma education budget for 2022 was over $3 billion with a B, not an M with a million with an M, $1 billion with a B, $3 billion. Okay. So numbers of kids in public school, or numbers of people, right, out of the 4 million, it's 17% of the whole population are under 18. Okay. 17%. So, well, I should say that, not under 18. The ones that are in public school are 17% of the population. So, $3 billion. And I hope I did the math right on that. So somebody check me. But it's a small percentage for a $3 billion budget. Okay. So let's just think on that. All right. Now, So if you, I went to the Oklahoma Tax Commission, and they have you can actually pull it down. It's the tax tables, right? So you can determine how much, income tax people pay. All right. So I went out and looked. So if you make under 7, and don't, hit me on but you didn't check on this. And I don't have time to check every single thing. I just checked the big, categories we were using for this tax credit. And then you can just kind of, uh, decide around those parameters, right? So for $75,000, people make about 20, or people put in about $2,509 in state income tax, but a lot of that comes back, for different tax credits. $150,000, $6,000, $225,000. And I used married couples in this, right? By the way, because we're hoping, even though it's only about half the population in Oklahoma anymore are, married with kids. But I'm just saying, and it's under half. I'm just saying that's the data that I use. So for 225 families who make $225,000, it's about $9,000. And for people who make $250,000, it's about $10,000. So let's think about the brackets, right? So in under $75,000, each child gets $7,500 each child. Okay. There's no way that's a return, a tax credit. There's not. So if we go to 150K, 7,000 kids, right? Because it's 7,000 per kid from 150 to 225. So that's not a tax credit either for that tax bracket. So you look at $225,000, and let's say you have one kid that goes to a private school, and you're going to get back $6,500. Okay. So yeah, you do get a tax credit for one kid, but if you do that for two kids, no, you're out of the box. It's not a tax credit anymore. It's a voucher. So, and it's the same thing with 250. I don't have to go through each and every one of these because all of you who are watching are extremely smart. So you can figure that out by yourself. All right. So then I went out and I just wanted to find out what your buying power was with these particular groups. And I'm not an economist. I'm not, and I don't even play one on TV. And I haven't slept at a Holiday Inn, but I can go out and look at different things. So I was really surprised. So I went on and I looked at people who made $75,000. Do you know that they can apply for it? Now, this isn't that you get and blah, and I'm just giving rounded kind of generalizations just to give a picture. Okay. But there's a possibility that you could get a mortgage for a $250,000 house. Okay. So if you make 150, 500,000. If you make 225, then 750. If you make 250, there's an $860,000 mortgage that you could get. Again, I'm not saying everybody would qualify for that. I'm not saying that, that's reasonable. I'm just giving you a parameter. But should we really be considering, and I mean, honestly, should we be considering giving other people's money to other people to put their kids in private school when they have a more expensive house than me? I mean, I just look at the number of vacations we didn't get to take. I look at the fact that we don't have one new car in our driveway. I look at the fact that all of these things, so that we could, now granted, my kids are all done now. I've graduated them all. But that was when we were, and I had 4 kids that I was homeschooling. I had 4 kids that I was homeschooling, and we don't have a, super expensive home and not new car. And so how come I have to scrimp and save, and I have to not have a vacation, but then we can turn around and give what we pay in, my husband and I paying in taxes to somebody who makes more money than we do, and I'm not even saying that would happen, because that's going to be the other argument. They're going to say, well, Jenni, don't forget, that we're prioritizing this, and the lower two income brackets are going to get priority over I get that. But I just want to make another point too. So I taught in public schools for about 10 years. My mom taught for 32. I can't see a lot of these parents pulling their kids out. And I believe, and I didn't check on this, so I mean, I'm just telling you, honestly, I didn't check on this, but I seem to remember when I went out and checked Arizona the last time, the people who are applying for their universal tax credit program, which is what this is, were the people who were in the 150 and above tax bracket. They weren't the people that we say, oh gosh, we really have to help these people get their kids out of school so they can get to something better. We say this over and over again, but those aren't the people who apply. And that offends me. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not like an offendable person or whatever and all of that, but that has to offend you, who, I would think that would offend people, because you're taking the tax dollars that I put in and giving them to somebody who makes about the same amount of money that I do to put their, I don't agree with this. Then I looked up the property tax, because don't forget, Nathan Dom said, well, when you add all of these taxes together, are you sure it's not a tax credit? So I went out and looked. The median property tax in Oklahoma is $796 per year. I mean, that seems low to me, because I know ours is about 2,200. Okay. But the median price for a house in Oklahoma is $107,000. So I think that's interesting, to note. And counties in Oklahoma collect an average of 74 percent basically of a property's assessed fair market value. So that's kind of interesting. So I even went out and looked up grocery tax, because I just wanted to cover I'm not saying I'm covering all my bases, but I just was curious. So I went out and looked, and there are all kinds of calculators that you can find on the web. You can check me up by going out to a calculator on the web and seeing what you can find. I'm fine with that and will accept constructive criticism. But here's what I found. For a family size of 3, your suggested monthly grocery budget with taxes is $700 a month. Well, at that, you're paying $63 in grocery tax a month. I want that to settle in there for a second, because I'm going to show you another slide down the road, and I'm going to want you to remember that figure. All right. So, $63 in grocery tax. And don't forget, it's a median of a little over 700, almost $800 in property taxes. Okay. So here are your grocery taxes. All right. Now let's look at this graph. And I can tell you actually where I got this. I don't really like to go there, but it was about the only place I could find. This was from the Oklahoma Policy Institute. They're a left-leaning organization. And so I don't really like to go out and use the things that they have, but they were the only place I could find, and actually had a pie chart that was, something that we could look at. Okay, so these are the major tax revenues in Oklahoma for 2023. Look at individual income tax and look at sales and use taxes. So here's what happened, in my opinion. So years ago, we basically passed a law that said that we could not raise the Oklahoma income tax without a huge supermajority of the House and Senate. So you can't just go in; they can't just go in and vote on that. So the individual income tax, it takes quite a bit to raise the individual income tax. So what did they do? They raised the sales and use taxes, because if you call it a fee and you don't call it an income tax, you get a pass. I'm just saying. But I mean, if you look at the graph here, there you go. So I remember now, they gavelled in for a special session and did absolutely bupkis and turned around and walked off. But there was talk about, helping us with a grocery tax. And there was, no. It's just silliness. It's silliness. If you really wanted to help Oklahomans, you would stop feeing and taxing the crap out of them. I'm just saying, you would. You would. And then the individual income tax ought to be the next one on the chopping block. But even before that, it should be property taxes, because as I've said 100 million times, and I know everybody's going, oh, Jenny, just shut up about it. But I'm telling you, we just talked to Lori Tuggle about that when she was talking just last week when she was talking about what she saw in Belarus. The first thing that we did that made us not free in America, in Oklahoma, was saying, guess what? Your property isn't yours. It's the government's, because I'm going to tax it. And if you don't pay it, I'll just take your property. I don't care how much you put in it. I don't care how long you've owned it. It doesn't bother me. I'm getting that tax come hell or high water. So that's the first thing. If you really wanted to help Oklahomans, everybody who has who is in the legislature, you would get rid of property taxes. But you don't want to do that. That's not going to happen, because, oh no, most of that goes to fund schools and libraries and tech centers, and we just can't do that. Oh, for Pete's sakes, I'm so sick of the nonsense over taxation. It's dumb. You can see it right there. Right now, let's look at this. This is the FY23 budget by function for the state. And I want to point out a couple of things. Lawmakers introduced largest budget in state history during final week of session. So we're going to continue to overfund, or we're going to just continue to grow government. Let's just say that. Sorry, I'm looking at a text just to make sure it's not somebody going, Jennifer. So the largest budget in the history of Oklahoma. So clearly all of the conservatives that are in the state legislature have shrunk government, because remember, that's what conservative meant. We conserve the power to the people out of the government. That was originally what the term conservative meant, conserving the power to the people outside of the government. Well, if you're creating the largest budget in state history, you're not doing that. You're growing government. Okay. Now, historic Oklahoma's $625 million education package agreed upon. Governor Stitt, Senate, and House leaders stand united. So think about this. We're going to say that public schools are not, they're terrible. We have to get kids out. The only way we're going to do that is by redistributing the wealth of Oklahomans to make sure that people can get their kids into a private school, which is going to suck all of the money out of the public schools, and they're going to wither and die. And then we can have a whole new paradigm, right? Okay, well, if that's the case, why do we keep giving the schools money then? Nobody's ever really been able to answer that question. So until I get an answer to that question, I'm going to say this is all smoke and mirrors. This is all kabuki theater. This is all left hand, watch the left hand while the right hand does the whatever. This is silliness. So look at this. In the budget, okay, education gets 44% of the budget. And how many kids did we say were in public schools? Right around 700,000 out of a 4 million population. You guys really need to think of scale here, really. And this isn't all the money that public schools get. They get a lot of money from nonprofit organizations. They get a lot of grants. We'll talk about this in a second. So I just want you to think about these things, and we're losing people as I go on, because it's so much more fun to have a position and not think about it. I get to have my money back. Well, maybe not, but maybe it's good to be open-minded and think about it. All right, now, so I just showed you how much money we're spending on the budget. I just showed you all of these things. Now let's look at this. So 8th grade mathematics, 16% of all of the kids that are in public schools, 16% are proficient. That means they can read. They're proficient at it. I can go read a book if I want. I can go order from a menu. I can go fill in X. 16% of 700,000 kids. of 4 million population. Come on, people. Really put your thinking caps on here. So reading for 8th grade, 21%. 21%. Oh, and I was doing math. So it's a wonder why nobody, have you ever gone to a place and they don't count your change back anymore? Do you wonder why? Maybe. I don't, just saying. So reading is 21% proficient. So less than a quarter of kids in Oklahoma can read proficiently. Less than a quarter. Okay. But it's the biggest part of the budget. All right. Grade 4 mathematics, we're doing pretty, hey, that's better than 16, right? Okay. So we start off okay in 4th grade, and by the 8th grade, I don't know, we just quit teaching them math. I'm not sure how that works. Kind of the same way with reading. In 4th grade, we've got 24%, and then it just falls off by 8th grade. So that's the NAEP. That's National Education. Oh, I always get it wrong. It's the national test that determines that. So let's look at Oklahoma. What are Oklahoma's academic achievement? Well, only 49% of kids are prepared to go to the next grade level. So not even really half of kids in each grade level are ready to go on. Well, what about the English language proficiency progress? So how well are English learners meeting the language acquisition targets? 32% for the state. Y'all, let's go back and look at this. Let's go back and look at that. Let's look at that. Let's look at this. Okay, so let's talk about this. So we had visit V1SUT Advantage on our podcast last week, and she talked about the drag queen principal at Western Heights, which is an Oklahoma County public school. And so she did a new piece that was just published yesterday, and I read it. It was amazing. Hoffmeister let Western Heights grant grift millions of dollars, then lost control. Walters is left to clean up the mess. So basically, the story says how these people at the Oklahoma State Department of Education got all of these grants from the federal government. They moved them to Western Heights because Western Heights scores were so low. And then what they did was they left the OSDE, went to Western Heights, were hired at Western Heights for more money than they made at the state so that they could, quote, administer these grants. And then what happened? So then they retired. So they retired at over $100,000 in salary when they were only making about 60 at the state. And now we, the taxpayers, are stuck with them going to a higher pay grade so that they can get a higher retirement, which, I mean, I don't know about whether Oklahoma, the education is funded or not, but how many entitlement programs in the United States are simply not funded? We know that. We're told that. They take the money and spend it for something else. So, hello, Oklahoma. Maybe before we start giving out these tax credits for kids to go to other schools, we ought to look in our own backyard and figure out where the money's going that we're pumping out to public schools, regardless of what we say about them every day. So that's just, you ought to look up this article. Really easy to do. Just look it up or look up V1SUT Vantage and it will take you to her Substack. All right. Sorry, but this is obviously redistribution of wealth. I just don't get how you get any other. I mean, again, this is my opinion, but I don't get how you get anything else. So why would the state gift someone who makes $150,000 a year money to educate their kids? And use the premise of, well, public schools are bad. If we just get all of the kids out, then the appropriations are going to dry up and then the public schools will close their doors. It hasn't happened. We just keep giving them more and more money. In the year that we gave this tax credit, we gave an historic investment in public education. It's just handing out money. And it's your money. And I know you're going to say, well, it's my money, I want it back. But I just proved to you, it's not your money. You're not getting it back if you're in those upper categories. All right, lots of data. Here's some other problems that we haven't even gone through. It. This isn't even money. Lots and lots of data are going to be collected through this tax credit. And it has to. Stop and think about that. If that's our tax dollars that are being redistributed, then I want to know where my tax dollars are going. I have a right at least to know that. So the accountability better be really good, right? That the only way you get accountability is you get accountability by collecting lots and lots and lots of data. So private schools have to submit to the state an itemized annual statement for each student that receives a credit. Private schools wishing to get the tax credit dollars have to register with the Oklahoma Tax Commission and provide proof of accreditation. Now, I'm pretty sure, I mean, anybody that's a business, you have to sign, you have to go to the OTC and bend your knee, to get all of the paperwork so that you can appropriately pay your taxes. So that's not an issue, but I'm just saying you do have to provide proof of accreditation. And there are, as I said before, and I want people to hear this, there are private schools out there that are not accredited. And there are people putting their kids, scrimping and saving to put their kids in unaccredited private schools because they know there is a separation between that school and the government at any level. They're not taking federal grants. They're not taking state grants. They're not likely to get influenced at all by that. I mean, we had an interview with Lauren Straka and her school in the Yukon area that she didn't want to have it be accredited for those very same reasons. So there are reasons not to be accredited. And by the way, what really does accreditation do? I mean, you talk about Cassidy or Heritage Hall, some of the major private schools in Oklahoma County. They're the wokest of the woke. I mean, I've heard people tell me that in Heritage Hall, they literally gave an elementary school kid a party for a sex change operation. I mean, why would we even want to spend Oklahoma tax dollars to put our kids in another woker institution if that's what your argument is, that they're woke? Why would you do that? You're just giving my tax dollars to another organization that's going to be even woker. That's a word. I don't even know. So think about that. How can private schools be required? And this was an interesting thought to me. How can private schools be required to submit proof of accreditation, but homeschoolers don't? So in order to get these tax dollars, you have to submit an affidavit saying that you're enrolled at this private school and this private school is accredited, but you're a homeschooler and you get $1,000 back on your taxes, but you are going to have to provide receipts. And then, that kind of might be something to really think about, I would think. All right. The bill states that if there's a revenue failure, we talked about this earlier, the tax credit program reduces in scope and direct percentage to the failure. So how hard is it? Let's just say we get some kids in the bracket that could use more assistance than the other one. So they're making less than $75,000. We get those kids into a private school and all of a sudden we have a revenue failure. Are you going to tell me Oklahoma hasn't had that before? I can tell you numerous times that we've had revenue failures. So then they get into this part. Now what's going to happen? Now these people who can't afford to have their kids in a private school anyway are going to be like, what am I going to do now? Right? And then the poor kid suffers. The kid's the one, now we're going to have to put him in a different school. Now we're going to have to move him to something else. Now, I mean, come on, people. Why should this even be a concern? Why should we even have to put that in there? I mean, are we budgeting more than we should at the state level? And I'm going to say, Yes, we're taking more money. And then instead of just giving it back or not taking it in the first place, we benevolently, oh, here are your tax dollars back to do this. And guess what? It's going to help, close public schools, blah, blah. Come on, really. All right. So I'm going to end this presentation with this. What are the problems with school choice? And I'm just going to say this: propaganda makes useful idiots. And Lenin, who coined the term "useful idiots," said this: "A lie told often enough becomes the truth." There are a lot of organizations involved with so-called school choice, and they pay millions. They get paid millions of dollars. We're looking at American Federation for Children right here. Their revenue in 2019 was $8 million. Okay. American Federation for Children, Ed Choice Alliance for School Choice, which is made up of AFC and some other groups. In Oklahoma, we have OCPA and ECHO. These are school choice groups, nonprofits. So here's a thing that I've said before that I'm just going to put the slide up because maybe that will help. So Ed Choice is a long-standing organization that's a nonprofit organization that has been pushing school choice, for decades. So if you look at this, Oklahoma offers K-12 students and their families several types of school choice, including 2 private school choice programs, charter schools, magnet schools, homeschooling, and inter-district public school choice via an open enrollment policy. And now people will say, we did that, but they're just not letting that happen. So why then even make laws? If the laws that you're making aren't going to work, stop making laws. I don't know. I don't know how to explain, but you can't just use that as an argument to me as to why we need to do something else because this law didn't work. So now we have to make a new one. No. So Ed Choice basically said, hey, Oklahoma has great school choice. This was before the universal tax credit. And we made that point numerous times. Okay. So this is on National School Choice Day website. Every child deserves a quality education. Well, you know what? In theory, we hope so. But see, as soon as you say people deserve things, and they use this all the time in like advertising, you deserve to have a new big screen television. You deserve to have that brand new car in your driveway. It's all deserved because they want you to believe that you're entitled to it. Your neighbor has it, so you have to have it too. That's just the way Western culture works. If I have it, if somebody else has it, I get to, come on. If that doesn't kind of fly smack, we say we're in the Bible Belt and we're a red state, but if that kind of mentality doesn't just fly in the face of coveting in the 10 Commandments, I don't get it. I don't get it, but that's how we make things work. That's how we do it. So if you say every child deserves, of course we want every kid to have a good education. Of course we do. But to say that they deserve it, it now becomes an entitlement. And it's that way, if it becomes an entitlement, the government now gets to step in and do their bit of business, right? And they'll take care of it for you, removing the onus of the family whose children it is to educate their own children. So that's the problem that we have. And that's propaganda. All right, so let's look at American Federation for Children. This is their tax return for, I think it's 20. Yeah, I think it's 22. All right, so they had revenue of $8.9 million, expenses of $7.73 million. Well, look at this. They are a 501c4 organization. That's a dark money organization because they don't have to disclose their donors. Why? Why is a dark money organization you can't even donate to American Federation for Children and take it off of your taxes. So who's donating to this? Well, primarily it's our former it's Betsy DeVos and her family. She runs American Federation for Children, and her family is the one that is primarily pumping money into AFC. So but again, we don't know who all the donors are because they don't have to disclose their donors. And I'll tell you for a fact that this year I have not gone through their donor list or their 990s to look at the taxes to see who's donating. But when I have in previous years, there have been some that have been dark that I haven't been able to see. So basically, it's a lobbying organization. And so if you look at it, and we have to remember this about 501c4 organizations. 501c4 organizations exist. Where I don't know where I'm going. 501c4 organizations may only spend up to 40% of any money that they take in for lobbying. All right. So here's what they say are their lobbying totals and for over the years. Okay. Well, but here's the thing. If you donate money out of your 501c4 to a state organization, which has the same purpose and name, we have an AFC in Oklahoma. It's run by Jennifer Carter, who is the former chief of staff for our former superintendent, Janet Breesy. And she has been involved in that organization for a number of years. And so if you donate from the federal level to that state level, then that money can be used at the state level, and you're not really having to declare that. So are these people spending more than 40% of their incoming revenue on lobbying? And if the numbers, are they jacking with the numbers to make that happen? I don't know. I'm asking the questions. All right. Now, Corey DeAngelis is the spokesperson basically for AFC. Here is Corey. He's often on Twitter. He loves to do Twitter. But here's something that's very interesting. So for years, he was involved with the UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab as a public profile expert. And there's his picture. And and I'm not the only one who took screenshots of this. They float around on the internet. So when you go to look up now, it says the requested page could not be found. Why would this person suddenly take all of this down or become unassociated with UNESCO when people started noticing that he was part of UNESCO, which lots of us realize? I mean, UNESCO is a global organization influencing state policy, which should never, 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 ever happen. It's the whole one world government umbrella that so many of us are concerned about. And yet here you have that. And it's actually well known at this point, I think. So here he is. He's sending out things. Tell your lawmakers to sign the Education Freedom Pledge. So they're doing this through email and they're signing people up. But I thought this is one of Corey's Twitters, and it just tweets or X's, whatever you call it now. You just can't cancel student debt. Someone who didn't agree to pay to the loan would have to pay for it. These people, so if you look at, and I like Brett Farley, I'm not trying to demonize Brett Farley or say, I'm just saying that these people have this one thing in their head and they are so laser focused on this and have these little blinders on, and they say the same things over and over and over and over again. But when you put them in context, they literally make no sense. You could go through that whole interview with Brett Farley and go, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you say that and then say this at the same time? It's just holding one view and then trying to explain another one. It's the most bizarre thing. So here's Corey DeAngelis saying, well, you can't just cancel student debt, but then he wants to make sure that every state in the union gets the state involved in gifting private people's income tax that they've paid into the state to other people. Am I the only person that doesn't make any sense for? How does that not make sense? I mean, how does that make sense? I can't make that make sense. So to me, it's got to be more of an ideology than a functional solution. All right, so there are more to come with that. I'm not going to go on and on because I'd like for people to actually watch the video, and I'll post a couple of clips, when I'm finished here for today. And I'm really sorry Michael wasn't here to chime in because I really would have loved to have had some feedback, and nobody sent in comments, which I was kind of disappointed about. I would have loved to have had a conversation, but so I kind of had to stop there because I wanted to make sure that I got done the original job, which was to look at the rules in comparison to the law, to the bill. And I wanted to get through that, but I just wanted to make the point with school choice because we're on that topic. That's what this topic is about. And we need to really talk more about who the organizations are that are pushing school choice and where that money comes from. And can you track that money? Is it even trackable? And here's my big question about that. Why do these organizations want to be involved in deciding how your kid is educated? They're national. They're not in Oklahoma. I mean, they have Oklahoma pods, right? But they're not made up of Oklahoma taxpayers deciding for Oklahoma tax. Was the big argument we had for Common Core. So that these were people outside of the state deciding educational policy for people inside the state. That was one of our big arguments. And yet this school choice is the perfect example of that same exact problem where lobbyists are coming in and there was an article that I read about AFC creating this huge PAC, and now the money's going to get dumped into a PAC, and that's how they're going. I mean, why is it that people outside the state are so interested in how Oklahoma families educate their kids? And why would they come in and tell us that it's our right and it's our money and we need our money back? My contention has always been that it's a ruse to get state dollars involved in private things. I mean, we do that all the time in this state, and we call ourselves a red state. We're going to give tax credits to canoe. We're going to give tax credits to the film industry. We're going to get tax credits are gifting other people's money to those organizations, to those, I shouldn't even say organizations, to those businesses which free enterprise says, which we're supposed to be a free enterprise state. Free enterprise dictates that those businesses have to duke it out together on their own to determine which one comes out ahead. That's free enterprise. But once the government gets involved and starts donating money to these businesses, they elevate those businesses above the businesses that aren't getting cash infusions of tax dollars from other people. We have to understand this. This has to be something that we're not okay with. That if we're going to be a free enterprise state, we're going to follow free enterprise. We're not going to do this Chamber of Commerce idea of, well, we can incentivize some businesses because they're good for the state and they're going to get our kids employed. And we've got to develop this workforce thing so we can keep our kids. That doesn't work. The more we imbue the state, the more we interject the state, the more we inject the state in what we're doing as private individuals or private businesses, the more we become wards of the state. There is no way around that. And the way that they do that is by not letting us keep our money, not letting us own our own property, not letting us do that, but by taking the money anyway and then telling us that they're benevolently going to give it to other businesses on our behalf to help our children, give it to other schools on our behalf to help our children. But it's not all children. It's certain children. It's not all businesses. It's certain businesses. We have to come to an idea that we're going to understand the way free enterprise works, and we're going to work free enterprise. And And if we really want to have individual liberty, that's the only way to do it. There just isn't another way to do it. You can't have individual liberty and take money from the government. You can't have individual liberty and then say that you're going to put your kids in a private school, but you're going to get tax dollars from other people to make that happen. This is a way, in my opinion, to control private individuals, to control the education of children to even a greater extent than we're already seeing. And I will make the point again, so many private schools are woke or practicing woke, DEI, I have DEI people on staff. Why are we going to complain about that in public schools and then send money to private schools who might be doing the exact same thing? I hope you've enjoyed this. I don't know, do you enjoy it? I can't really figure out if that's the case or not. Do you enjoy hearing a bunch of data? But I've said over and over again that at the beginning of the year, I felt like God said, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And in this particular context, in the state that we're living in today, the knowledge is power, but knowledge has always been power. Knowledge has always been power. I mean, anybody can take advantage of you if you don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes it's willful ignorance. We say, well, I don't want to know that. I feel like I'm entitled to this and that's just the way it is. And we're just willfully ignorant. And we're willful about, I want these tax dollars. They're my tax dollars and I'm going to take them and I deserve them. And that's the way it is. But then on the same, side, we're going to complain about, DEI people. And, oh, I love you, Mavis. Thank you for chiming in. Mavis, sweet Mavis, thank you. Tragically, the average Oklahoman does not care. Smoke and mirrors is exactly correct. Thank you. And I like it when people say yes to me. I'm just kidding. I also want people to keep me accountable too. No one thinks anymore. Does anyone really want individual liberty anymore? One would say yes, but if it requires discipline, peace out. Discipline brings freedom. We don't live in a time of this anymore. Yes, yes. Keep bringing the data. Thank you. Bless your heart. I really appreciate that. But I do think that, I wish that weren't the case. And but I meet so many people who say things like, well, I voted in the presidential election. I voted for Trump. Well, good for you. I mean, and that does, dictate national policy, but you've got so many things in your own backyard. And if you're not voting in those, you're not voting in school board races. You're not voting in school bonds. You're not voting for city council races. You're not voting for city council established bonds, for city bonds. If you're not voting for your state senator or your state House representative, if you're not doing any of this voting on a local level, you're out. You're out of the discussion. What we really, a state is a tiny piece of a larger group. And originally we were supposed to be individual states. We weren't supposed to have policy institutes that meet and then say every state needs to have this policy or this law. You go back and tell your legislature what to do. We weren't supposed to have that. We were supposed to be crucibles of invention, as Jefferson said. Took me a second. Jefferson said that states were supposed to be crucibles of invention. We're not that anymore. And these are things that we need to think about and think about deeply. And I won't keep you for any longer because we're almost in an hour and 30 minutes. But thank you for those of you who stuck with me on this trick. And if you are on this trick, what the heck was that about? Thank you for those who have stuck with me on this podcast today. I really do appreciate that. And thank you for your comments. Yes, local issues. So thank you, Mavis. We just need to go and we need to make sure that our neighbors understand this. And I think part of what we do is we say, well, I get it in the circle of friends that I'm in, we get it, but then we're preaching to the choir, and we really honestly have to go beyond that. When you go to church, talk to the people that are around you. When you go anywhere, talk to the people that are around you. We're never going to get anywhere if we're preaching to the choir. We have to be able to reach beyond that and make good explanations. And that's why we need to know the data. And because we need to be able to know the data well enough to say, now that you have the data, now think on those and to make our point. So please stay engaged. Please talk to your neighbors. Please talk to your church members. Please talk to the people around you, because of the fact that that's the only way that we're going to grow our group, is to do that kind of thing. So hang in there. And we'll see you again on Friday. And on Friday, we will be with Janelle Shellum. And Janelle is going to talk to us a little bit about some of the books that she's found, again, in Edmond schools for her kids. And so we do need to talk about that. So join us again on Friday. Hopefully, Michael will be feeling better and he'll be with us. And then we'll see you then. So thank you again so much for sticking with me on this podcast today.